You know, I think it's pretty fair to say that for as much as I love the Fake Karakura Town arc, it definitely starts out quite slowly. When you get past the initial excitement of having the good guys and the bad guys coming together in one place, the top three Espada being there, Aizen being there, and you start settling into a bit of a rhythm, you realise that the numerous battles against the Fraccion are taking quite a while. They do feel a little bit dragged out, particularly when you were reading it weekly like I was. That was a tad painful. You know, going through Yumichika versus Charlotte, Izuru versus Avirama, Amida versus Nerge, all the while I was just sitting there thinking, this is great, but I would love to see the Espada fight. Like, I was itching to see Stark fight back then. And I was like, you know, come on, Kubo, this is wonderful, but can we just, you know, the Espada are right there. And yeah, there are some highlights, of course. Hisagi's Shikai Kazushini revealed in his battle against Findor. That was great, obviously, even better in the anime. But towards the end of the Fraccion battles, it feels like Kubo himself was maybe having enough of this formula and decided to shake things up. And when we get to the battle between Rangiku and Momo versus Harabel's 3 Fraccion, the Bestias, things take a sharp and sudden change, with the introduction of a very unique character called Ayon. And Ayon is what we're going to be talking about in today's video, because I do think for his very limited amount of screen time, he is a very unique force within Bleach's story, and one that strikes fear into everyone around him both times he shows up. However, before we get the ball rolling on that, guys, if you haven't subscribed yet, our next milestone we're going for is 60k. So if you are new here and you're a fan of Bleach, you're in the perfect place for content like this every week. So hit that button now, and don't forget to give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well, because it does help with exposure on YouTube. And also, if you want to continue supporting the channel in a slightly different way, you can now become a member by hitting the join button down below. So for a little context surrounding Ayon's initial appearance in the series, Momo has just arrived in the Fake Karakura Town fight, and she has managed to make a mockery of all 3 of Harabel's Fraccion, Apache, Mila Rose, and Sun Sun in one single attack. And it's pretty impressive, and it really does the job of getting them very annoyed. All 3 of them activate their Resurrection, and then they never actually fight with them. It's a really interesting setup, and not one we ever really see again. In fact, the moment they activate their release forms, they decide to end things quickly, and they cut off their respective left arms, and those left arms fuse together with a pretty horrifying ability called Chimera Parker, which then summons the monstrous Ayon. Now, this is weird. We've never seen anything like this in Bleach before. A monstrous creature is created in a similarly unholy way. Their left arms just twist and mesh together and somehow create this completely separate being. There's nothing else like it in Bleach, and he does feel very unique because of it, and Ayon essentially is the fight against Harabel's Fraccion. They themselves don't really take part at this point. It is all him. And he's a fascinating character, and I believe I'm pronouncing his name correctly. When back weekly, when it first came out, when he first appeared, his name was spelt with 2 L's, as though it should be pronounced Alon, but with the whole Spanish theme, I believe that should actually be Ayon. I think that's pronounced correctly, and future releases, future translations do have it spelt as Ayon, so I think that is how you pronounce it. But Ayon arrives for the very final section of the Fraccion battles at the start of the Fake Karakura Town. He is the last obstacle the Shinigami face before the Espada finally takes center stage. And up until this point, the Shinigami have, for the most part, been absolutely steamrolling the Fraccion. The Fraccion have lost basically every single battle, with the exception of Choneng Po defeating Ikaku, and then basically getting one-shot by Komamura a chapter later. So tension really is at an all-time low. But it feels like Kubo was just lulling us into a false sense of security, because Ayon appears and the atmosphere immediately changes, and I always found this to be fascinating. So he's got this immediately imposing, terrifying, and almost otherworldly design. You know, he must be hollow of origin, because the Bestias are. But he doesn't really look like a hollow. He kind of has what looks like a mask, but you're supposed to think it's his face at first. And Kubo loves his creep. Kubo loves his scary body horror. We see it more than ever in the Thousand Year Blood War arc, but Ayon was a real early taste test of that. And Matsumoto herself, when Ayon first appears in front of these two Shinigami, she even says that when she looks upon him, it's like looking into a sinking, black, bottomless pit. You know, there's this sense of despair that she can't quite place. And yeah, I get it. It looks like Ayon has these two soulless black eyes, almost like a skull for a face with these huge antlers. Really, really creepy stuff. And just a great design, I think, in general. Really good for inspiring terror. What I like most about Ayon, however, is that he does not conform to any of Bleach's normal tropes. He is not beholden to Bleach's writing cliches. You know, when a villain brings out a new transformation or something, normally they'll monologue, they'll talk about it or something like that, explain their powers, which normally, you know, that's fine. But Ayon is a really nice change of pace. The reader feels the terror that Matsumoto and Hinamori are feeling when this guy appears on the battlefield, because it is so out of nowhere. It's out of nowhere, you don't expect him at all. And Kubo uses that to his advantage. So Ayon appears and Matsumoto kind of has a moment of thought, and then immediately on the next page, Ayon is like in front of her. And it's really, really scary, but it's just really impactful as well. And Kubo, the way he draws Ayon as well, he moves in such an unnatural way. Like he kind of lunges at Matsumoto like this, and he's immediately coming for her. You know, she doesn't have a chance to react, and he takes a chunk out of her side, pretty much without doing anything. It's actually kind of weird when you look at how it's drawn. He must, because his hands are enormous, like they're big enough to grab Matsumoto like he grabs a Shinigami later on anyway. But he must have hit her like that, because he tears like the entire chunk of her side is gone. In my opinion, certainly up until this moment, this was probably the single goriest thing we'd ever seen in Bleach. Matsumoto's entire side is gone, and you see it, and then you see Ayon looking at the piece of her flesh and then dropping it. I remember turning the page and being like, Matsumoto's dead. Like, I thought she was dead. I thought there was no way. I thought, I couldn't believe it, but I thought Rangiku is the first casualty of the Shinigami in this war. She's dead. Obviously, she doesn't die. But, you know, we'll get into that in a minute. But, yeah, Ayon, immediately effective, immediately terrifying. He doesn't say a word, and instead you turn the page, and there's that impact of him immediately lunging for Matsumoto. There's no villain monologue, no spiel, nothing like that. He just goes for it, and I think that's awesome. I think it's really well represented, and it immediately puts the fear of God into you as well, because like I said, the Shinigami have been winning basically every fight up until this point, and then suddenly one of them suffers a potentially fatal injury. Really, really cool. And then he, of course, goes for Hinamori, because she's next, and he just sort of punches her in the chest. Considering what he does to Matsumoto, I'm kind of surprised this doesn't just, like, obliterate Hinamori. I mean, she basically does get... I think Kira says later on that her lung has collapsed and you see blood coming out of her mouth and her arms look like they're broken. I think she says that her arms are broken. So he basically has taken out 2 vice captain level Shinigami in the space of a couple of pages at this point, and it's crazy. But like I said, it's done really effectively. It is a bit weird. I do feel like Ayon does kind of come out of nowhere. He is a Chimera. He is made up of their 3 released forms, and I do like how each of their release animal themes does correspond to a part of a Chimera. Sun's a snake for the tail. Mila Rose is like a lion for the body, and then Apache is like essentially a deer or something for the head. That's really cool. I never ever saw it coming, but I don't think it matters. I think it's a really neat little gimmick. But regardless, 2 of these guys have now been taken out, but Hinamori and Matsumoto are rescued by Hisagi and Kira, who obviously have defeated their respective opponents at this stage. And this is how Matsumoto lives, and I don't mind this at all. Kira is shown to be treating her medically from almost immediately. So I think that's absolutely fine that he's able to do that. And he's treating her basically for almost the entire of this fight until right at the end, obviously when she gets up. But now the fight has changed. We have these two warriors who have already been shown to defeat their opponents, and they have a slight advantage compared to Matsumoto and Hinamori, because when Ayon appeared, they had no idea what he was, no idea what he was capable of, and that is felt through the drawing. Hisagi and Kira, they've seen what he can do, and so Hisagi comes at this fight from a slightly different angle, and he uses Kazushini at range to wrap Ayon up and then hit him with a Kido Suzuri Raiden and try and bring him down. And initially it does seem to work. Ayon falls. And then Hisagi kind of lets his guard down, and we get to see Ayon be really creepy again. He kind of twists his arm around and tries to hit Hisagi almost like a backwards swing, at which point Kubo really emphasizes the fact that Ayon flips himself back up onto his feet in this really creepy way with no access to his arms because he's technically bound still at this point. Really emphasizing again the body horror with Ayon. I think Kubo just had loads of fun with this character, which becomes more evident in a few pages when things really go crazy. But at this point, Kubo is he is definitely having fun with Ayon. He's kind of sowing the seeds for the madness that's about to occur. But Ayon again immediately appears in front of Hisagi, grabs him, smashes him into a building, and this is when things get weird. So initially you're supposed to think that Ayon's face is this deer skull mask thing, and that you're staring into his bottomless eyes. But actually no, that is his nose. And he kind of opens this colossal mouth from beneath that mask thing, like he's going to swallow Hisagi whole. And it's okay. I remember at first thinking he kind of looked a bit ridiculous, but I have more, not necessarily respect. Why I think I kind of understand the design a bit better now. It's going for this eldritch abomination thing. And he is a true monster. And even the Tre Bestias mentioned this. Apache says, I wish we hadn't brought him out. He really grosses me out. But his, destructive potential is clear. And it seems like he's about to eat Hisagi, but then Iba appears behind it, wielding his, I believe, still unnamed Shikai. And this is hilarious. I can't believe this is basically all Iba does in the Fake Karakura Town arc. He tries to attack Ayon from behind. We then find out that those things are not Ayon's eyes. He has massive eyes. They appear from his mane. Really creepy. And the anime has this thing where whenever he moves his eyes, there's a sound, which is so gross, but it works really, really well. And he twists his eye to look back at Iba. It's and Iba's oh dear. And he gets hit by a Sero and just immediately taken out of the fight, which is hilarious. But now we have a full view of Ayon's face, and he has these two enormous eyes. His antlers acting as massive eyebrows. The skull mask is his nose, and he has this huge mouth. And he's just really, really weird. He's really creepy, but he tosses Hisagi aside. And I kind of like that. I think it works, because Ayon is this completely uncontrollable beast. He's supposed to be animalistic. In some ways, I imagine he's supposed to be a physical representation, an embodiment of a Hollow's animalistic nature. He doesn't bother when Kira saves Matsumoto from in front of him because he's not interested in that, and he gives up with Hisagi because he can't be bothered with him anymore. It's a cheap way of making sure Hisagi doesn't die, but it still works. But anyway, Ayon then advances on Kira, who is still trying to heal Matsumoto and Momo, and the situation looks pretty dire until a massive hole just appears in Ayon's chest, going straight through his back to his front, and it turns out that Yamamoto has arrived on the scene to take on Ayon. Now, back in the day, this was a wow moment. Yamamoto's finally stepping onto the scene. The Fraccion battles are actually really heating up at this point. The Captain Commander has felt the need to step in. And I do wonder how well the other captains would have fared against Ayon. It does seem kind of weird that the upper echelons of Soul Society wait this long, especially since Komamura has already been involved and now doesn't have anything to do again. But back then, it was a crazy moment. Now I look at it and I sort of think Ayon was basically just created to give Yamamoto a cool moment, which I don't have a problem with, because actually, this is possibly my favourite Yamamoto moment in the entire series coming up. But yeah, so Yamamoto comes in and he's I'm really disappointed in all of you. You know, you're getting your Captain Commander to fight. That's embarrassing. And just want to stop and talk for a moment about the composition of the Fake Karakura Town. And this is, I know I've said this before, but I want to make a video about why the Thousand Year Blood War is a better and more effective war from a storytelling standpoint than the Winter War. And this is a primary reason. You know, everything happens in a vacuum in the Fake Karakura Town arc. It's difficult to suspend your disbelief in some ways because, you know, you're watching Ayon kick the crap out of these Shinigami, knowing full well that there is a litany of captains right there. You know, like they're literally right there. I know Hitsugaya's busy, Shunsui's busy, and Soifon is busy, but that means Komamura's still around. You know, Ukitaki's not really doing anything, he's just fighting Lilanet. So you kind of know that someone can step in. Everything that happens in the Fake Karakura Town can be seen by everyone else, whereas in the Thousand Year Blood War arc, let's take Omaida in the back streets facing off against the Soldat. As far as we're concerned, no one knows he's there. And it makes it more tense for Omaida. So really what you get here is, in the Fake Karakura Town arc, I love it, I do love it, but it is just a succession of cool moments. But, you know, that's fine as well. And Yamamoto really does get a chance to shine here. You have to remember as well, back in the day, we'd never really seen Yamamoto do anything. You know, it's really weird to think. But the Fake Karakura Town arc was an introduction to many of these captains for the first time. You know, Yamamoto released Ryujin Jaka in Soul Society, but he never uses it. He never does anything with it. You get a really cool release, couple of pages, but then he doesn't actually use it. You really get to see him fighting for the first time here, and Ayon is just immediately turned into this childish, mindless creature in front of Yamamoto. And it's kind of weird. It is kind of weird because Kubo, you know, he's at the end of the Fraccion battles and he brings in Ayon clearly to up the tension a bit. But it is weird how Ayon is completely in control for 3 chapters and then just instantly killed in 1 chapter. Because he does die in this chapter. And again, I get it. You know, he uses a couple of chapters to make Ayon scary, and then he gives Yamamoto a moment. It's that balancing act, you know, that does it makes tension difficult. But regardless, Yamamoto, he's awesome in this. This is one of my favourite Yamamoto moments ever. Ayon just tries to swing at him, and Yamamoto's next to him, puts his hand on Ayon. He's like, you missed me. You know, are you really just a mindless being who just thinks about killing things? That's pitiful. And we get great Yamamoto face shots in this fight as well. But then he uses Ryujin Jaka #1, I think, Nadagiri or something like that, which is basically just a very fancy sword slash. Looks awesome in the manga. It's very different in the anime. In the anime, it's definitely more of a sword slash. Like, he kind of comes past Ayon, I think, and there's like this whole thing of him swiping and then sheathing his sword again. In the manga, it almost looks like a whirlwind of a slash. They're both cool. And the result is the same. Ayon gets split straight down the middle. You know, the anime showing everything because he's a monstrous creature. And one thing I do want to point out, actually, about the anime is when Ayon gets the hole in him, that Yamamoto makes, I think, just by like jabbing his sealed Zanpakuto toe in his back, because that's what it looks like. In the manga, Yamamoto says to Kira, keep an eye on your enemy, and look what he's doing, and Ayon like smacks his chest and starts going crazy at the fact he's been wounded. That moment is played out for a comically long time in the anime. Like, I think Ayon is like just doing this, and I really think it's for like almost 5 minutes, and he just constantly is smashing his chest because the obviously had to fill the time. But regardless, Ayon gets cut in half by Nadagiri and he falls, and then you get to see just the creepy way he doesn't seem to be able to die. Half of his body like comes back up again, and he's also at this. Kubo likes. I wonder if Kubo was like coming up this on the fly with Ayon, but he's just increasingly giving him creepy things to do. Once he kind of tries to attack Yamamoto, he uses this ability, which I think in English is called the hammer. I can't remember it in Spanish, of course, but it makes his arm bulbous and inflated. For no reason. I don't know why he can do it, he just can. But yeah, Yamamoto cuts him in half after that. And then this second half of Ayon just rises up and tries to attack him again, his eyes like spinning. Kubo has this thing where he has these kind of eldritch characters who he likes to eviscerate and then show that they're still alive in like grotesque ways. I can think James in 1,000-Year Blood War arc is very similar to that in that regard. But Ayon rises, half his body comes up, lurching towards Yamamoto. It's a great moment. And this is my favourite, probably my favourite Yamamoto moment ever. Particularly good in the anime. Basically, Ayon lunges at him and Yama's like, you really don't know when to stop. He's like, don't you know the meaning of stop? And he says, like, you child. And without even saying the name of his Zanpakuto, he just unsheaths his blade and instantly incinerates him. Yes, it's so good, and it's so good in the anime as well, because the way he says, there's like this moment of pause, and you see Yama's eye, and he's like, you child, and he just instantly kills Ayon. It's brilliant. It's so good. It's basically my favourite Yamamoto moment in the series. Showing just how leagues above everyone else he really was, because, Ayon was trashing vice captains, and Yamamoto just completely obliterates him. And then he wipes out the Bestias who try and attack him, but he leaves them alive out of respect for them attacking him with only one arm. So, yeah, that's the end of Ayon in Fake Karakura Town, but I think he leaves a lasting impression, lasting enough to get a volume cover, even if it is basically my least favourite volume cover of them all. Kubo could have done a lot more with that, to really show off how scary Ayon is, but it's fine. I think Ayon achieves what he was here to do, though. He really strikes fear into the reader and the hearts of the Shinigami, taking out Matsumoto like he does in one of the goriest things I've ever seen in Bleach. Trashing Hisagi, trashing Iba hilariously. But it's really Ayon's design that does it for me, that makes him so memorable. And then he returns in a lovely little callback in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc right at the start, when the hunting commander Sternritter J. Kurge OP is subjugating Wakemundo and the Bestias are standing in front of him, and he defeats them all. And then once Ichigo has distracted him, Ayon arrives because they've all released and they've cut their arms off, and he's back again and he punches Kurge in the face. You get this really nice sequence where Ayon just beats up this Quincy in Volstendig. And it's, again, really cool seeing Ayon on the hero's side. One of the things I absolutely love about the start of this arc, that I think it does so impeccably well, is actually featuring the Hollows in a meaningful way. I love Apache's line to Ichigo where she's like, you guys are not Ayon's enemy anymore. Get out of the way if you don't want to die. And it's such a marked change from the Fake Karakura Town arc, really shows the progression of the world and where these characters are at now. But, there's no real surprises with Ayon anymore. He has kind of played his hand, as it were, in the Fake Karakura Town arc. So we immediately see the crazy eyes, we immediately see the massive mouth, because we know what he can do. It's now Kurge OP who is on the receiving end of that. And it's fascinating when you think about it, because you think about things from a perspective point of view. The Shinigami are very much our perspective, because they know they're the heroes, and in Fake Karakura Town arc, we are seeing Ayon from their perspective for the first time. We're much more a spectator in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, because we know who Ayon is, we know what he can do. The only character here, really, obviously Ichigo and the others haven't seen him either, but Kurge doesn't know anything about this character. And so we're kind of now with the Arrancar on this, and it's a fascinating change of perspective. And, Ayon just beats him up. And it's great because, of course, Kurge is an obvious villain. He's evil. You get to see Ayon actually go nuts and just completely smash him into the ground, mercilessly beat him into the floor. There's a great panel where OP's legs are just out of the sand, but obviously he survives because of his blute. That's a great scene as well. And I really hope they play like some sinister music when Kurge comes out of the sand, because it's a really creepy moment. He snaps his broken neck back into place, and he's like, I'll have to inform His Majesty that the blute needs to be strengthened, even though blute basically never comes back. But then Ayon dies again in, a really nice tension-setting moment where Kurge, using his Volstendig, uses his Scravelay ability, which is Reishi domination cranked up to 11, essentially. And Ayon attempts to attack Kurge, and the moment he does, he is stripped to the bone. And it's, again, really gory. Everything involving Ayon is really gory, apparently, but you see it in total detail. Kurge just rips the flesh and the skin and everything off Ayon's skeleton, and he just collapses to the floor, and you see it all coming off him, you see it coming off his legs and his spine and everything like that. It's gross. And then Kurge himself has Ayon's body parts, and that's a great design as well, really showing how far these Quincy have fallen in their search for power. Kurge even has the nerve to say that you've tainted my holy wings with wickedness, despite that you are the wicked one, but okay. And you get this really horrible looking guy, and I think it's really, really effective. It's really great final showing for Ayon. How does, a lot of people brought up the question, how does Kurge assimilate Ayon when he's a pure Quincy? And they're supposed to be poisoned by Hollow Reiatsu. I think there's maybe two explanations here. No, it's never confirmed how he does it, but I've got a couple of ideas in my mind. The first one is Ayon is not a real Hollow, and this is what I brought up at the start. Is he really a Hollow? I know he's an amalgamation created by 3 Hollows, but he is also weird. He doesn't seem to have his own Hollow hole. And maybe that thing on his face is supposed to be a mask, but he doesn't seem to me like a proper Hollow. But he's made of Hollow Reiatsu, so that shouldn't count. So my only other thought is that Kurge's Scrave Lay ability, we can assume that every Vandenreich member can do this, but Kurge is the only one who ever does it, so it could be specific to the jail. And it would fit with this whole domination theme. We could maybe surmise that his Scrave Lay ability is so dominant and so powerful that it doesn't matter what the Reishi is, or what the Reiatsu is, it just crushes it all down and assimilates it regardless, and, what traces of Hollow Reiatsu were left are mostly gone. Maybe it could be one of those two things, I really have no idea, but either way, Ayon is not around for long this time, but he is used effectively to showcase how dangerously Kurge actually is for these guys, and I really like that scene. But that's basically it for the Chimera terror that is Ayon. A really unique, fascinating character who is not around for long, but he does make an impression, and I really like his little return in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc. I think that's really great as well. It's nice to see him again, even if it is very, very brief. But his death, I can't wait to see in the anime. I think they're going to, again, I think they're going to make it as gruesome as they probably can. It's going to be really cool, because it's very visceral in the manga. It really kind of showcased the difference in tone the final arc was going for as early as that moment. So that was really awesome. But that's really it for Ayon, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of this character. What do you think of the Bestias in general? Do you like Ayon, or would you maybe have liked to have seen them fighting in their resurrections themselves? But let me know in the comments below, and if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to do that now. But until next time, guys, I'll catch you later. See you then.